The Amazing Adventures of Saint Anthony, a kid's story of kindness and miracles. Hey kids, have you ever dreamed of going on a big adventure, talking to animals, or making magic happen with prayers? Well, that's exactly what happened to a real-life hero named Saint Anthony of Padua. He lived a long time ago, but his stories are still super fun and full of surprises. Let's go on a journey with him. I'll tell you all about his life in a way that's easy to understand, with lots of exciting parts. Anthony was born in Portugal, a beautiful country with beaches and castles, and he became one of God's best friends. Ready? Let's start from the beginning. Anthony's happy childhood in Portugal. Picture this. It's a sunny day in the year 1195 in a city called Lisbon by the sea. Ships are sailing in with treasures from faraway places, and seagulls are flying high. In a cozy house with a garden full of flowers, a baby boy is born. His parents name him Fernando, but later he'll change it to Anthony. His dad was a brave knight who protected the king, and his mom was a kind lady who loved telling stories from the Bible. Little Fernando loved playing outside, running through the streets with his friends, chasing butterflies, and building sandcastles on the beach. But what he loved most was going to church. The big bells would ring, ding dong, and he'd sit quietly, listening to the priests talk about Jesus and how God loves everyone. God is like a big warm hug, his mom would say. Fernando thought that was the best thing ever. As he grew bigger, around 5 or 6 years old, Fernando started school. He learned to read and write, and his favorite book was the Bible. It had stories about Noah's Ark with all the animals, David beating the giant Goliath with a slingshot, and Jesus walking on water. I want to be like them, Fernando would say. He was always helping others too. If a friend lost a toy, he'd search until he found it. If a poor kid had no lunch, he'd share his bread. His parents were proud, but they knew he wanted something more. By the time he was 15, like a big kid who's almost a teenager, Fernando decided he wanted to live in a monastery. That's like a special house where people pray and learn about God all day. He waved goodbye to his fancy home with soft beds and yummy food, and walked to the monastery gates. "Hello, I want to join you and serve God," he said. The monks smiled and let him in. There, he wore a simple robe, ate plain meals like bread and soup, and studied hard. He learned Latin, which is an old language, and how to be kind to everyone. It was like going to God school. Fernando was so happy. He helped clean the floors, grow vegetables in the garden, and take care of sick people. God is in everything, he thought, even when scrubbing pots. But deep inside, he dreamed of bigger adventures. He wanted to tell the whole world about God's love. Little did he know God had a super plan for him. Becoming a friar and starting the adventure. One day when Fernando was a young man, something exciting happened. 5 brave friars, special helpers like monks, but who travel around, came back from a faraway land called Morocco. They had gone to tell people about Jesus, but bad guys hurt them. The friars were martyrs, which means they gave their lives for God, and they looked peaceful even in death. Fernando saw their bodies and thought, "Wow, they were so brave. I want to be like them." The friars were part of a group started by Saint Francis, who loved animals and nature. Fernando asked to join them. Yes, the monks said. He changed his name to Anthony, after a saint who lived in the desert. Now he wore a brown robe with a rope belt, like Saint Francis. "I'm ready for adventure," Anthony said. His first big plan? Go to Morocco to teach about God. He hopped on a ship with waves splashing and sails flapping in the wind. "This is fun," he thought. But oh no, a huge storm came. Thunder boomed like drums, lightning flashed like fireworks, and rain poured like a waterfall. The ship rocked like a seesaw, and Anthony felt sick. "God help us," he prayed. Everyone was scared, but Anthony kept praying. Suddenly, a soft light glowed around him, like a shield. The storm calmed just enough, but the ship got blown off course. Instead of Morocco, they landed in Sicily, an island in Italy. Anthony was weak and tired from being sick, but local friars helped him. They gave him soup and a warm bed. Why did God change my plan? Anthony wondered. But he trusted God, like when you lose a toy and find a better one. He rested and then traveled to a big meeting of friars in Assisi. There he met St. Francis himself. Francis was short and joyful with a big smile. "Be kind to everyone, even birds and wolves," Francis said. Anthony nodded, excited. At the meeting, thousands of friars gathered under the trees, singing songs and sharing stories. No one knew Anthony was smart yet. He was quiet like a mouse. They sent him to a tiny hermitage, a small house in the woods near Forlì. There, Anthony did simple jobs, sweeping floors, washing dishes, and chopping wood. "Chop, chop," he'd say, swinging the axe. He also prayed a lot and read books about God. It was peaceful, with birds singing and flowers blooming. Anthony was happy, but God had more adventures waiting. Preaching and making friends with animals. After 9 months in the hermitage, something amazing happened. It was a special day for new priests, with Dominicans and Franciscans together. But no one was ready to preach, the talk about God. The boss pointed to Anthony. "You do it." Anthony was surprised. "Me? Okay," he said, his heart beating fast. He started slowly, but then words came out like a river. He talked about God's love, using stories from the Bible. The priests listened with wide eyes. "He's awesome," they whispered. Even the bishop was shocked. Word spread to St. Francis. "This Anthony is a star." Francis let him preach everywhere, but said, "Always pray first." Anthony traveled all over Italy on foot, through green fields and hilly roads. Crowds came to hear him, farmers, kids, even kings. "God loves you all," he'd say with a smile. People stopped fighting, shared food, and became friends. It was like magic. Now here's a funny miracle. In a town called Rimini, some grumpy people didn't want to listen. They said bad things about God. Anthony was sad. "Fine," he said, "I'll talk to the fish instead." He went to the sea and called, "Fish, come hear about God." Suddenly, fish popped out of the water. Big ones, small ones, all lined up with their heads above the waves. They listened quietly. The grumpy people saw and said, "Whoa, if fish listen, we should too." They all became believers. Isn't that silly and wonderful? Another time, a man doubted the Eucharist, the special bread that becomes Jesus. "If my mule kneels to it, I'll believe," the man said. Anthony agreed. They starved the mule for 3 days, then offered hay and the Eucharist. The mule ignored the hay and bowed to the bread. "See," Anthony laughed. The man hugged him and everyone cheered. Anthony was like a superhero with God power. He also taught other friars in France. "Study but love God most," he said. They sat under trees, reading books and asking questions. Anthony was patient, like a good teacher. One day, a thief stole his book, but Anthony prayed, and the thief brought it back, saying sorry. That's why Anthony helps find lost things, like your missing sock or toy. The Sweet Dream and More Kind Acts. One night, Anthony stayed at a friend's house. The friend peeked in and saw something magical, Anthony holding baby Jesus. The baby was glowing, smiling, and hugging him. "Shh, it's our secret," Anthony said. It showed how much God loved him. Kids, imagine holding baby Jesus. How cozy! Anthony became a leader, helping other friars live simply and joyfully. He fasted, ate little, and prayed all night, but always smiled. In Padua, he helped poor people. "Let's give bread to the hungry," he said. He started a charity, like a food bank, where kids got treats too. He defended the poor from mean moneylenders, saying, "Be fair." People called him Wonder Worker because of miracles, like making poisoned food safe or healing a boy's cut foot with a touch and prayer. The boy jumped up, happy as a bunny. But all the traveling made Anthony tired. He was only 36, but his body was worn out. He went to a forest near Campo San Piero and built a tree house. "Time to pray quietly," he said. Up in the trees, with birds chirping and leaves rustling, he talked to God like a best friend. One day, he got very sick. "Take me to Padua," he asked. On the way, he saw Jesus in a vision. "I see my Lord," he whispered with a smile. He died peacefully on June 13th, 1231. Kids in the streets shouted, "The saint is in heaven." Bells rang by themselves, ding-dong. Miracles happened, sick people got better, and everyone felt God's love. Becoming a saint and helping kids today. The Pope made Anthony a saint super fast, less than a year. That's like winning a gold medal right away. They built a beautiful basilica in Padua with towers and shiny gold. Years later, when they checked his body, it was dust, but his tongue was fresh and pink. "His words about God live forever," they said. He's called Doctor of the Church for his smart teachings. Today, Saint Anthony is famous for finding lost things. If you lose a toy, pray, "Dear Saint Anthony, please come around. Something's lost and can't be found." He helps because he knows how it feels to lose stuff. He's also the friend of poor kids and animals. So kids, what can we learn from Anthony? Be kind, pray hard, and trust God's adventures. Even if plans change, like his storm, God has something better. Next time you see a fish or a mule, remember his stories and smile. The end. Wasn't that fun? Saint Anthony shows God loves little miracles too. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe.